The National Football League year has officially begun for the 2024 season, and the Chiefs make a splash as Stone Cold is back with a new 5-year contract. That's right, Chris Jones will be a Chief for the next 5 years. But in this episode, we'll also take a look at a big vote. Matt will talk with Chiefs President Mark Donovan. And also, it's the football version of the New York Stock Exchange. This edition of Defending the Kingdom is brought to you, as always, by the folks at Ticketmaster. This offseason, again, some epic concerts here, including early July at GEHA Field at Arrowhead Stadium. Make sure you connect with Ticketmaster to get your ticket needs. McKinnon is in at running back. First down and goal to go. Play action fake. Right side throw. Touchdown! Kansas City! McCole Hardman with the catch on the right side. A 3-yard touchdown pass in overtime. And hi, everyone. I'm Mitch Holthus, voice of the Kansas City Chiefs, along with senior team reporter Matt McMullen. This episode in 3 different segments: the Stone Cold Lock, the Big Vote, and the New York Stock Exchange, because the NFL season is off and running, especially with the free agent period. The legal tampering, which that drives people crazy.
It's an oxymoron.
And it's like the speed limit at 75 and everybody drives 90, right? So anyway, legal tampering is kind of come and gone, but now we're in full-fledged free agency. But before we start any of that, let's go around the world before I forget it.
Well, and let's also do a quick caveat that this is like the most dangerous time for us to do a podcast because as we're recording this, I'm sure a bunch of things will happen, and then we're not going to talk about it at all. We're filming this on Thursday afternoon, all right? So if things happen after the fact, we don't know about them as of now, but we will see. As of now, we'll talk about everything that we know. We'll quickly go around the world here. I have just 2 for you today. I heard from Thomas from Palmer, Alaska.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I told Thomas I'll be up there in Alaska in a few months. That trip's coming up. I can't wait. In June, going to Alaska with my wife. And then heard from Carl in North Carolina. And also, shout out to my grandpa. My grandpa is 92 years old, celebrated his 92nd birthday just a few days ago. Currently in the hospital right now, recovering. He had pneumonia. He's going to be okay. Celebrated his birthday in the hospital, but we brought him all his favorite things, had a little party for him, and he's on the mend, doing great. So shout out to you. Gramps, you're the best.
And Gramps, in this calendar year, you saw your alma mater, the Missouri Tigers, win a New Year's Day game and winning the Cotton Bowl. You also saw your favorite NFL team win a back-to-back Super Bowl championship. Now, he's experienced all of the Super Bowls, going back to Super Bowl IV, but he has to be incredibly proud of his grandson because, as I said, 6,944 days separated the last back-to-back Super Bowl champion to this back-to-back Super Bowl champion in the Chiefs, but Gramps had to really enjoy Super Bowl 58.
No, he sure did. It's been fun because he'll tell me stories about when he'd go to Chiefs games with my dad, and we were talking about when I was over at the hospital the other day, we were talking about the Dolphins game, the super cold game, which feels like a million years ago now, but back in January, and he was talking about the longest game ever played, the Christmas Day game against the Dolphins way back in the 70s, and telling me all about that. And I brought up to him how Jan Stenerud, one of the greatest kickers of all time, right? Like a Hall of Famer, like Super Bowl champion, just such a great player. I interviewed Jan last year for just a feature on him and the player that he was. And I didn't bring up the Christmas Day game. He brought it up. And he's
Jan
like,
brought it up?
He brought it up. He's
like, usually it's like, Mitch, don't ask me about the Christmas Day.
He brought it up. He's like, it's just what I think about still. And I'm like, man, you're a legend. It's been like 40 years. And that's a true competitor right there. But I told my grandpa about that. And he's like, Jan doesn't have to worry about that. It's okay.
Full disclosure, there are times I'll drive by 22nd in Brooklyn. You know, it's now the Monarch Plaza, they call it, and it's Homes, where Municipal Stadium used to be. There's a kind of a shrine there for some of the past greats. But, you know, I'll think about that game and others in that old stadium. But Jan, the Chiefs don't win Super Bowl IV without Jan Stenerud.
No.
It's really underrated. I mean, Lenny, all right, gets MVP. We know about the hitch route to Otis Taylor. We know about 65 toss power trap, and we know about the incredible defense that we referenced to actually in talking about the 23 Chiefs defense. But Jan kicked 3 field goals in that game. At the time, it was the longest field goal in Super Bowl history. It put the Chiefs up by 2 scores at 9-0, and it really kind of took some of the wind out of the sails of the Vikings. If you think about the field goal, that Harrison Butker hit against the Ravens that put the Chiefs up by 2 scores right before the half, psychologically, that had a bigger effect on that game than people realize, because the Ravens usually were leading by 2 scores and never had trailed by 2 scores. So what we saw this year in Harrison Butker is very similar to what Jan Stenerud did in the Super Bowl 14.
Yeah, because for a team to win the Super Bowl, you not only have to be really good, you have to be really good in the margins as well, right? And special teams are the margins. Harrison Butker being perfect in the playoffs, I mean, that's a gigantic reason why the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. Every time the Chiefs were in field goal range and they put him out there, he converted every single time. And how about the field goal in the Super Bowl, the 57-yarder? I mean, who knows what happens if he doesn't make that kick? So I'm with you. We've had some really great kickers in Chiefs history, in Jan Stenerud and Harrison Butker. And you reminded me of this just now with the defense. So the defense this past year, I'm adamant, was one of the greatest of all time with everything they accomplished. The 1969 defense was also one of the greatest of all time. But it doesn't get remembered for some reason nationally, and I think part of it is they didn't have like a nickname, like the Purple People Eaters or like the Steel Curtain, and I think the defense this year needs a nickname. I don't know what it would be, though.
We're going to come up with that in the offseason. But on that Chiefs defense, there were 6 Pro Football Hall of Famers.
Yeah.
Not Chiefs Hall of Fame, Pro Football Hall of Famers. More than half that defense is in Canton, Ohio. So
crazy.
Awesome. And speaking of great defenders, that's where we're going to start, because the first part of this podcast is Stone Cold Lock. We love free agency in the National Football League. We can't wait. It's like waiting for the holidays and what's under the tree to open the gift. Honestly, the best teams in the National Football League are those who draft well, cultivate those players, able to keep those players, invest in those players. And here is Chris Jones. Did not hit the free agent market because Brett Veach and the Hunt family and Clark Hunt, because what is least respected about the Chris Jones deal, there's something called cash over cap. The cap is very real, but when you have cash over cap, you can forward cash ahead. It takes a lot of cash in this instance, right? Think about the $95 million guaranteed to Chris Jones. But by doing that, it actually, Chris Jones's cap figure in 24 is something like $7.8 million. But it takes a commitment from ownership, and it takes a commitment from Brett Veach to make this move. But to get Chris Jones a new 5-year deal is significant, because he did not hit the open market, and we're thinking if he would have, he might not be a Chief.
It's such a big deal. We talk about how great this defense was last year, best defense in the NFL. Well, he was the best player on the best defense in the NFL. He was the anchor. He's the guy that makes the whole thing go. He's the engine. And to get him back when he's still in his prime, he's a 3-time Super Bowl champion already and just such a great player. It's a huge, huge deal. And for a couple of reasons. I mean, for the fate of the Chiefs next year, the year after that, and so on, obviously important. But also just for if you're another player on the Chiefs, a young player, and you watch Chris Jones get drafted by the Chiefs, gets a second contract with the Chiefs, outperforms that contract, and gets paid again by the Chiefs, that's a really big deal if you think about it, because it shows that this organization is going to reward you if you are a cornerstone player like that, and it works out with the cap and the money that you have at the time. Just a gigantic contract for the Chiefs to get done before free agency began, because you're right. I mean, 31 other teams would love to have Chris Jones on their team, because he's just such a mismatch, such a difficult player to plan for. I'm glad he's still a Chief.
The NFL fans, too, also love sacks. Sometimes they love sacks too much because there's a lot more to defense than sacks. And in Chris Jones's case, and the sacks were there, again, double-digit sack year for Chris, but people say, gosh, isn't that a lot for an interior defensive lineman to pay this contract in a 5-year deal to Chris? There's a couple things I think Matt and I want you to look at here. One is the influence of Chris Jones that go way beyond actual sacks. And then 2, his multiplicity of value to this team. And we see it in Spags' defense. We talk about the more you can do and the versatility. All right, let's just take these specific plays for Chris Jones. You're saying, man, that's a lot for an interior defensive lineman. Well, what if is it too much for a edge defender? Because the market for the edge defender is actually more in this case.
Yeah.
But his play against Cincinnati, going back to the AFC Championship game of the 2022 season, where he moved Carlos Dunlap inside because he saw a way of getting to Joe Burrow on the final drive of the game, which, by the way, in that game he had 5 quarterback hits. But he was lined up on the outside shoulder, a 7-tech in football terms. Let's go to the play against the Buffalo Bills this year in the divisional playoff game where he is lining up on the outside, the 7-tech, and he makes a bull rush into Deion Dawkins, a good left tackle. Buffalo's reinvested in Deion Dawkins. He pushes him back into Josh Allen and forces an errant throw to an open receiver in the end zone, incomplete. Super Bowl 58. Last play, 3rd down for the 49ers on their first drive of overtime. He's able to get an A-gap pressure, which forces Brock Purdy into an incompletion, open receiver. But outside, inside. This is not an edge guy. I'm going to say he's not an inside guy. He's a both guy. And there's very few guys in the league that can say that because Aaron Donald doesn't line up outside at the 7-tech very much.
And a lot of times, yeah. And at a lot of times, you'll notice he'll make that switch at the very last second. So he'll be inside, and then he'll move outside. Or he'll be outside and move back inside. If you're a guard or you're a tackle and you think that you're facing Chris Jones or you think you're not going to face him, all of a sudden everything changes when he moves. And think about those moments you just listed off. Those are 3 of the biggest defensive moments in Chiefs history. And he was right there in the middle of all of them, impacting the play from a different spot on the field. So you can't put a price on Chris Jones and what he can do. He's only 29 years old. He is the only player in the NFL over the last 4 seasons to have at least 60 pressures in each season. Think about that. Think about all the great pass rushers in our league. They have had down years. They've had years where they can't stay healthy. Knock on wood. Every year, Chris Jones has been out there of late. He's been effective. He's been a menace on the opposing quarterback, and he's been a versatile defender. And last year, he was the best player on the best defense in the NFL.
And 2 of those 3 plays that I pointed out, only 1 was a sack. Okay? The other 2 resulted in winning the game and winning a championship. You look at 27 knockdowns last year, 40 hurries, the best of any interior defensive lineman, but we know he's a slash. When you look at what he has done, and then winning 9 of his last 10 playoff games. I mean, and then what does he do to help George Karlaftis?
Yeah.
What does he do to help the rest of the defense? And so there's a ripple effect. Oh, gosh, he's had a down year, only 10.5 sacks. No, it's all the other stuff that he does to help this defense and help his teammates.
And that's why I look at pressures, because pressures are so important in these instances. You're right. Look at that 3rd down in the Super Bowl. Brock Purdy had an open receiver. Juwan Jennings was open, and if he catches that, all of a sudden the Chiefs marching down the field, a touchdown doesn't win the game, a touchdown ties the game unless they go for 2. Who knows what would have happened? But still, enormous play for Chris Jones to blow that up because Brock Purdy has no time. He has to throw it away. The play's over because of Chris Jones. So I'm so glad he's back in Kansas City. Let's have a few more of those in the Super Bowl for years to come.
Stone Cold Jones, a stone cold lock for the Chiefs for the next 5 years. The second part of our Defending the Kingdom podcast is we're going to take a left turn here and talk about the big vote that is coming up for Jackson County, Missouri voters. And that is a continuation, basically, of attacks to help, basically, the Royals move downtown to play in a new stadium there, but also to go to a reimagining of GEHA Field at Arrowhead Stadium. And your thoughts overall on that, and you had a chance to talk with President Mark Donovan about it.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It's an opportunity to secure football and baseball in Jackson County for decades to come. It's an opportunity to for our stadium, for GEHA Field at Arrowhead Stadium, to remain in Jackson County and to receive some funds in order to refurbish it, also add to it, and to make the most iconic venue in the NFL, in my opinion, I guess next to Lambeau Field, even better for the next generation of fans. It's an amazing opportunity. And for more on that, I had a chance to catch up with Chiefs President Mark Donovan earlier this week. All right, we're joined now by Chiefs President Mark Donovan. And Mark, one question I get a lot is, what do you do in the off season, right? Like the season's so busy, what do you do in the off season? And anyone in sports knows that the off season is incredibly busy, and especially this month, both on the football side, There's free agency going on. Chris Jones just signed a new deal a few days ago.
Yeah.
But also particularly for you in the business operation, it's all this stadium stuff, and it's the vote coming up on April 2nd.
Yeah.
I think a lot of fans know a bit about this, but can you tell us where things stand right now with the upcoming vote on April 2nd?
Yeah, we're weeks away from April 2nd, and great opportunity for us to commit to extend our stay here in Jackson County and to really make a transformational renovation to Arrowhead Stadium, which I'm really excited about. I know it's hard to see through the renderings and through our videos on the website, but if you're in it as close as I am, it's going to be amazing. And it gets you excited to be able to say, we're going to take what I think is one of the most iconic venues in all of sports worldwide, and we're going to take the best and the boldest things that have been done in the last 5 years in new stadiums, and we're going to incorporate those into this building. And we're going to take advantage of this opportunity to make sure that we're impacting every single fan. So if you're on the upper level, if you're in a suite, if you're in a club level, if you are on the lower level, your experience is going to be better after we do this. And that's one of our goals in the project.
And there's so much work that goes into something like this. It doesn't just happen. There's been so much work behind the scenes by so many people to get to this point. Can you tell us a little bit about that, all the work that's taken place behind the scenes?
Yeah, so we've been working on this for 2.5, 3 years. And, we went through all, as you can imagine, you got to do all the evaluation. This is a generational project, right? And I will tell you that the people in the room, we take that very seriously. It's a big responsibility. We have to get this right. And we've done all the research, we've done all the analysis, and we came to a conclusion that we are all unanimously excited about, which is the best thing for us moving forward would be to renovate and enhance this beautiful building. And we can do it in a way that really makes the experience better for everybody, as I said, but also, raises us up another level in terms of venues. I'm really proud of what we've been able to accomplish with GHA Field, with Arrowhead Stadium, with our tailgating culture, with the ability to bring all the concerts that we did over the last year and also beyond that. But also, we're now on a map we've never been on as a city, as a region. To host the NFL draft and bring the biggest event in the history of this town, that's because of the commitment that the Hunts made to Kansas City, and it's because our fans are amazing, and people want to experience that and be a part of that. Do that really successfully, and then that really leads to the ability to even be in the ballpark to have a conversation about hosting a World Cup. And now we've secured not only the World Cup coming to Kansas City, which by itself is, I don't think it gets the understanding of how big a deal that is. Imagine 4 Super Bowls coming to Kansas City.
Wow. That's
what it's going to be like for this town. And then the fact that we actually made the list of quarterfinals is it was a pleasant surprise for us, because when you think about that, think about where Kansas City is today. The other 3 cities are Boston, Miami, and Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Kansas City's the 4th city on that list. And there are a lot of cities who would love to be where we are right now. And a big part of that is our venues, our fans, and our franchises.
Such an amazing intersection where this is the greatest run of success in obviously Chiefs history, but really for most franchises in North American sports history have never experienced a run of success like this. And it's happening when so many other great things are happening in Kansas City, like the draft, like the Royals All-Star game even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Like so many great things happening in our city. This is a chance to really keep that momentum going. Now, you've had an opportunity to meet with a lot of stakeholders, people that this really affects. What are some of the most important and impactful things that you've been asked or heard when in those meetings?
Yeah, I think it's been a real education for all of us, and I think for everybody on all sides of this issue. You early on, you realize that you've got to be able to have really constructive conversations with people who may have different opinions and who may have different agendas and may have very different priorities. So what we've tried to do is say, what can we do with this agreement going forward to be more beneficial to everybody involved? So I'm really proud to be able to sit here today. We're weeks away from the vote, and we have proposed and have almost down to the final few details a lease extension which would be better for the county, better for Jackson County, better for our fans, better for voters and taxpayers than our 2006 extension. So we've increased the benefits for our fans and our taxpayers. We also are working very, very diligently on a community benefits agreement that will be better than the 2006 agreement and has the potential to be somewhat historical in terms of the benefits we will create. And in return for that, we got into a negotiation with the county executive where, they raised some issues and said, look, we need help. We need more in this deal. And we sat back and said, okay, we're not getting anything more. The benefits are exactly the same for us. The tax remains the same. It's the same amount of money. What are the specific things that you need help with? And they came back and said, we need savings here, here, and here. And we came back and said, okay, we're going to remove $3.5, almost $3.7 million a year out of the county's obligation to us in the form of a tax levy. We're going to give that back. We're also going to cover the insurance of our buildings. So if you think about it, property insurance is something we all have to deal with. Think about it on the stadium front.
Yeah.
Right? In the existing agreement, the county has that obligation. They pay for that. We said we'll take that back as well. Those two things alone, over the life of this lease extension, will generate $200 million back to the county.
Wow.
So that's a savings for the county, which we are putting into our deal, into our agreement, which we've already agreed to in writing. And that is in return for keeping the same deal for us. So we're very focused on doing a fair deal. We're very focused on extending this so that we can continue to do what we do. What that allows us to do is, from the fans' perspective, is renovate the building, right? To maintain the building, to keep this county-owned asset. The county actually owns the stadium. To keep this up and running and able to host World Cups and able to host AFC Championship games. And that gives us the ability to invest even more into it. So think about it from a perspective of how much we invest every year in this building. Last year we put $23 million into this county-owned asset to keep it up and running. Next year we'll do more. That number is going to go up after we do the renovation. That's just the reality. So we feel like we're in a very good place right now. I do think that to be objective, there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of information that is floating around, which some of it's accurate, some of it's very inaccurate. And we're trying to simplify the message as much as we can for our fans and for taxpayers and for voters, that it's really about, this is a very, very good deal for the county. We have been really good partners, and we've had really significant benefit for this county. And we're asking to extend that. And we're not asking for a better deal. And in return, we'll continue to invest the tens of millions of dollars we do every year in the building, but we'll add another $300 million on top of that we'll put into this building to bring it up to the level that it needs to go to.
When you mention all the noise out there, you might have what you just said as your answer, but what's something you wish just everyone knew? Because this is all very complicated stuff. It's easy to get confused or lost down rabbit holes when you're reading about all of this. What's something you wish just everyone that this pertains to knew about this?
Yeah, I wish it was simpler. I wish it was clearer. That's just the reality of what you're dealing with. Some of it is language, right? You're dealing with political rules. So, we've got to get an ordinance to get a ballot initiative. Ballot initiative has to be phrased in words that are specific and restricted. And I mentioned this before, but I'm sure it's happened to others. I will admit it. When I walk into a voting booth in Jackson County where I live, there are a number of times I've walked in there in the past where I've read the ballot language and I'm very confused. Mm-hmm. I don't know what I'm voting for. I don't know if I know I want to support it or I don't want to support it. I just don't know which way I'm supposed to vote based on the language. Our language isn't that confusing, but it is confusing. So if I could wish for one thing, it would be to simplify it for everyone who's going to go and vote. And I think the simple message is no new taxes. This is better for everybody, and it keeps the two teams in our region. I would amplify that with, just think about last year. This organization, the Chiefs organization, had an impact on this county and on this region of almost $1 billion. In that $1 billion of actual revenues, there were over 5,000 jobs. on an annual basis. That's not for over the next 10 years. That was last year. And if we can extend this existing relationship, then we can continue doing that and having that kind of impact. So it's less about, hey, well, how does this affect me today? It's more about how do you have a positive impact on this region, and what do you need from us to continue that?
One for decades to come, for generations to come.
Mm-hmm.
And for really people of all different backgrounds, demographics, socioeconomic backgrounds, like all of that, this renovation, as far as I can tell, was created with everyone in mind. Because if you're going to a game, these renovations are going to affect you in one way or the other, whether it be the sideline suites, which are really cool, but also if you're on the upper level, the 360-degree walkway is a big deal. The coverings on the upper level, where if it's really hot, it'll cool you off, and vice versa.
Yep.
Those are a big deal. Why was it so important to make sure that these renovations that are going to be affecting the taxpayers benefited everyone, not just a small group?
Yeah, I think that's one of the core principles we take into every renovation. We did this in the 8, 9, and 10 renovation as well. As we look at every decision and say, how does this impact our fans in a positive way? How do we enhance the experience? And then we look at every single fan. And a lot of those benefits are very specific, right? So if you're an upper deck fan, imagine you're sitting in the upper deck. And right now, you come down, you walk out, and there's a pretty cool gathering area, sort of a patio with a big sports bar and a bunch of different concession stands. Well, we're going to take that and enhance that experience by putting a canopy over that on both sides of the stadium. That canopy will have infrared heat. It'll also have the massive fans to keep it cool in the summer. We've all been up there, right, in August for a preseason game, and you can't stand out there for very long because it's so hot. Well, now it's covered and cooled. In addition, those kind of additions will make every other aspect efficient, so we can add more bathrooms, we can add more concession stands. On the upper level, for our fans up there, we're also going to finally solve that problem that we have, which is you can't get around our stadium on the upper level. You got to go up and down to do it. We'll have a 360-degree bridge that will connect every single area of the upper level, and that really amplifies that benefit of when you do that, all of a sudden the people who typically come down and then go to the middle are going to come down and stay on their corners, which makes it better for them, but it also makes it better for the people in the middle because those people are coming in and creating capacity issues there.
Sure.
So those kind of advantages are part of the renovation, and they're an important part. Don't get talked about as much as end zone suites or new clubs or the activation zone that's going to be outside where the K was, but they're just as important.
What are you most excited about when it comes to renovations and you're looking at all the things that could be in the near future? What excites you the most?
Yeah, I think it's the whole package. And I say that meaning I've shared the story before, but when you're doing this work and you spent the last 4 years, every single away trip, you go to them as well. So every single stadium we're at for hours and hours, pre and post, right? And so every time we went to a new stadium, Clark and I would spend some of those hours actually looking at what they're doing, understanding how they did it, understanding the pros and the cons and the challenges and the opportunities. And what we did was we made a list of the best things we could possibly have. And we got most of them in this renovation.
Wow.
And the ability to bring those really cool new things and enhance the experience into this iconic building is what gets me most excited. So it's not one piece, right? I think as we get into it, I think something will shake out and I'll say, okay, this is the coolest thing out there.
Yeah.
But right now it's the whole project. And frankly, for all of us who've been working on it, the opportunity to be part of this, right? Had Lamar not brought this team from Dallas here when he did, had we not had the successful run we've been on, we probably wouldn't be in this situation. And now the people in the room and our taxpayers are going to vote to decide what the next generation looks like. And to be a part of that's pretty cool.
Yeah, very exciting. You make a good point, too, about the other stadiums in the NFL. I mean, we have 2 in our division that are brand new and are world-renowned in Allegiant and in SoFi, and they are incredible places to take some of what makes those new stadiums so cool and to put them into a historic venue like Arrowhead is such a great and amazing opportunity that is right there. Now, those are the exciting things, but the maybe undercover things are also really important. Things like making sure that the building is just still intact, making sure the building can sustain for decades to come. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the renovation itself. It isn't necessarily the flashy stuff, but the really important stuff too.
Yeah, there are a couple levels of that too. I mean, when we did the analysis early on, we had to make sure that to even consider an extension of this building and to consider a renovation, we got to look at this is going to be a 60-year-old building when we start construction. How much longer can it last? What do we need to do to keep it? Can it even last? And through a bunch of analysis, through a lot of experts helping us out, we were able to determine that, yeah, in fact, we can. And this thing is going to be good for at least 25, hopefully 40 more years. But it's going to take annual investments. It's going to take annually correcting things that, the reality is that some of the things that were built that exist today were built in 1970.
Yeah.
Not 72 when we opened, but part of the initial foundation. The good news is we can. The good news is the experts have told us that we're in good shape, so that's what we're going to do. And then, the ability to look at it operationally and say, how can we be better as an operating team, right? So the people who operate our stadium on game day and for concerts, it's not sexy stuff, but the reality is if they're better, if they're more efficient, then the fans' experience is better, right? So, right now there are so many challenges in a building that was built back then that we can fix. I talked about the 360-degree bridge on the upper level. We're going to put a 360-degree tunnel on the service level underneath the building. Most normal venues have that. We don't. And what we're going to be able to connect is the operation side. So right now, if you're servicing a concession stand or a suite or something like that, you basically are going to one corner of the building and having to get back and forth through the crowd because there's no private way for you to do that. Well, this solves that puzzle. Connected to that will be a brand new tunnel. So our fans will see the tunnel because it's a massive tunnel, right? So if you think about how our players come on to the game and how the visiting team comes on the game prior to the game, they're coming through what we call the E-tunnel. Well, now there'll be a tunnel on the other end, which not only makes us more efficient, makes us in step with every other venue in the States that have more than one tunnel. But it creates the opportunity to we can move the locker room, the visiting locker room over there. We can create an entrance for our fans that actually come down that tunnel. We can create some VIP areas like we did with the existing tunnel. So it just gives us more opportunity. And, that's something that we're focused on and probably won't get talked about as much, but I think at the end of the day will be almost as beneficial.
Yeah, back in 1972, the NFL wasn't what it is today.
Yeah.
And when they built the stadium back then, they weren't thinking about Luke Combs and Taylor Swift and all the events that happen here in the World Cup. But it's an opportunity to use this same venue, upgrade it so it can better efficiently serve all of those things.
Yeah.
Again, just a great opportunity. Final question for you. With Kaufman no longer being here, the entire Truman Sports Complex would be the Chiefs, essentially.
Yeah.
What's the benefit of having a single-use complex like that?
Yeah, so it's another point that is probably not as talked about, but the ability to be just the sole tenant creates a massive opportunities for us, and we are going to aggressively pursue those. So when you think about last year, we had a record-breaking year in terms of concerts. Number of concerts, number of people who attended concerts, it was a record year for us. We're going to build on that momentum, and the ability to just open up all those other dates that used to be blocked by Royals games and prepping for Royals games and Royals activities that aren't games. So now those are all gone. We have the ability to do more, period, right? So that's one of the reasons for the activation zone. That's one of the reasons for a lot of the renovations that we're putting in the lower bowl, including that tunnel. I think the second thing that it does is we can actually pursue ways of entering and exiting the complex. We can pursue different ways of parking. We can pursue different ways of dealing with rideshare. We can actually create roadways that didn't exist before. We can create new parking decks that we didn't have the ability to do before because you've got to put that over your schedule blocked by 81 dates. Well, now those dates are gone, so we have the ability to do much, much more. And it's not only adding more concerts and more events, but it's doing all those little technology things and those little operational things that now we have the time to do, and we can do them focused on, this is focused on getting somebody to and from an event at Arrowhead Stadium. And that's a freedom that we haven't had in the past. that'll make it, as I said, much more efficient and enhance the fans' experience.
Yeah, well, again, this is the golden era of Chiefs football. So many teams never experience a run of success like this that we're right in the middle of. And what a great opportunity to enhance the experience even further for generations to come. Mark, really appreciate your time. And if you want to learn more about this, you can visit yesonOneJacksonCounty.com or Chiefs.com/Arrowhead Reimagined. All the information, all the renderings, any questions you might have, you can find all your answers at either of those two websites. Mark, once again, thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Matt.
All right, great stuff there from Mark. I really appreciated his insight. It's a complicated deal. It's hard to follow at times. There's a lot of information out there, a lot of misinformation, but really great having Mark stop by and walk us through it.
It was interesting, Clark Hunt, when we had the news conference at the Hall of Honor, referencing the vote, talked about, and you mentioned Lambeau Field before the interview. Lambeau's really become kind of a prototype for the Chiefs Kingdom and for the Hunt family, I think, and what they see in the future for GEHA Field at Arrowhead Stadium to take it into the second half of the 21st century, if you will, but then also to keep why it's special. And we've seen that in Lambeau. I mean, it's modern. It's a 365-day destination, but it's still Lambeau Field. You're going into a museum where Bart Starr had the quarterback sneak in the Ice Bowl. You see all those things in your mind and relive it. And the same thing, I think, here with what the Hunt family would love to do with GHA Field at Arrowhead Stadium. But we know what the venue has been to you or me, and that's just an example of the millions of the Chiefs Kingdom who love the place.
Yeah, I think about the vote back in 2006 that extended the current 3/8 cents sale tax that is trying to be extended this time around, and all of the amazing things that were added to Arrowhead. And I was just a kid back then, but to experience all the memories that I have there over the last 20 years in that venue, and for the opportunity to keep doing that for the next generation of fans is pretty exciting.
So the first portion of our Defending the Kingdom podcast, Stone Cold Lock. The second, Big Vote. The third, and our closing segment, has to deal with the New York Stock Exchange. If you've seen these images, right? I've never been a part of a group that has rang the bell to start the New York Stock Exchange, but when they do and the bell rings, all of a sudden it turns into this frenzy, like a piranha eating fish food in the Amazon, and that is all these traders are on the floor going crazy. That, to me, is the word picture to give with free agency. We mentioned legal tampering at the beginning of the podcast. It just seems weird. But once that legal tampering begins, oh my gosh. And again, we're doing this on Thursday afternoon. So 100 things will happen between now and when we post it. 10,000 things have happened. Monday morning feels like 2 months ago. There's so many things that happen every day with every team that it's amazing to see how crazy this week has become.
And to make it even crazier, I think those that cover the league on a national basis, this gets muddied sometimes, where on Monday and Tuesday, that's the legal tampering period. It's not the official period. So you'll hear that all these players have been signed. Like, you'll be refreshing Twitter and you'll see that all these players are all in all these different places. But nothing's official, and it doesn't happen super often, but sometimes players change their mind. Will Lutz changed his mind. He signed with one team, said, actually, never mind, and went back to the other. Eric Kendricks changed his mind during the legal tampering period. So if you see that a player gets signed on Twitter, you don't always know during the legal tampering period. It's extremely confusing. And the official league year began on Wednesday at 3 o'clock. So that's when things can actually become official in terms of signing free agents from other teams. But it's always the time of year where a few teams are trying to, win free agency. They're trying to get all the buzz going about them, and I get it. I mean, if that's what you want to do, if you think that's the best opportunity to help your team, I understand it. But the Chiefs have never really lived in that world, and the proof is in the results that giving out a ton of money during the first couple days of free agency rarely pays off in a big way. I guess sometimes maybe it does, but just because the Chiefs don't necessarily make a huge splash this time of year every time, it doesn't really end up mattering in the end, because Brett Veach and co., they know what they're doing.
Most of the teams that have won consistently over the past decade, you can just follow this, have not been crazy in free agency. I gave the analogy a year ago, I think, of the Black Friday after Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah.
Everybody goes nuts in shopping for the next widget or gadget. Usually Apple's got them in the corner. But then you're going, man, I paid way too much for this. And then they get their credit card bill like in mid-January and they're freaking out. All right, that's a little bit of what can happen during the free agency. The other thing that we have seen now as a common thread during free agency is teams, the best teams, are able to keep their own free agents or pending free agents. And let's just go through who the Chiefs have kept. Drew Tranquill's a big deal to get him back and to have him sign a 3-year contract. Mike Pennell might be the most underrated, influential player in winning Super Bowl 58 of anybody on the roster. Leo Chanel would be really close on that too. Deion Bush, remember the interception against Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. And then James Winchester. You don't recognize long snappers until they screw up. And then all of a sudden it becomes like a congressional inquiry. But to get those guys back and to make those decisions are not just short-term decisions. They are really 2 to 3 year decisions.
So some quick thoughts on all of those guys. Drew Tranquill coming back is such a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about it last year when we signed Drew, thinking like this could be one of the sneaky signings of the offseason. Not so sneaky now.
No.
I mean, what a weapon this guy was all year long. He was the player we thought he could be, which is a versatile linebacker who can play all 3 linebacker spots. He can be a blitzer. He can drop back in coverage. He can do all of that. But what can he also do? Nick Bolton gets hurt for a chunk of the season.
8 games.
8 games.
8
half
games.
the season.
Half the season.
And Drew Tranquill comes in as the green dot, and you don't skip a beat because he is a starting linebacker in the NFL. Do you know what kind of luxury that is to have that kind of player to be the heart of your defense? And the best defense in the NFL does not skip a beat. Huge deal getting Drew Tranquill back. He's still a young player, going to be here for a while now. And he loves to be here, which I love that as well. He's talking at his presser about how Kansas City has this like childlike high school like love for football.
Yeah, he gets it.
And I relate to that. I know that. I love walking around my neighborhood and seeing the Chiefs flags and the stuff in people's yards. I love that. That is Kansas City. And he gets that. And he wants to be a part of it. Yeah. So glad that Drew Tranquill is back. And Deion Bush and Mike Pennell, you're right about Pennell in the playoffs. He had 115 defensive snaps in the playoffs. That's significant. And you look at Pro Football Focus, you alluded to it, he had the number 2 defensive grade of any Chiefs defender in the Super Bowl. And he played significant snaps in the Super Bowl. He played 40 snaps in the biggest game of his life. So Mike Pennell, getting him back, just really solid, good player in the middle of the Chiefs defensive line. I told him after the game on the field, I was like, all you do is come to Kansas City mid-season and win Super Bowls. Well, hopefully now he can be part of the entire offseason training program and win a Super Bowl with us.
Do we give him till October off? I mean,
maybe that's what he does. Because remember, if you don't remember, for whoever's listening to this, he joined the team mid-season in 2019, had a pretty sizable impact. Chiefs won the Super Bowl. Same thing happens in 2023. Joins us in like week 12 or something, and then Chiefs won the Super Bowl. So let's just keep that going, Mike. And then Deion Bush.
And before we go that, watch his play against Christian McCaffrey. You and I look for the underrated play or the underrated sequence. His hit on Christian McCaffrey, it's a B-gap run late in the second half, and he basically destroys him. And when you have a hit like that, even if you're as good as Christian McCaffrey and you carry the ball 22 times, when on the 20th carry you get slammed like that, just changes the way the rest of the day feels. So it's an underrated play. Go find it and see him and the tackle he makes on Christian McCaffrey. Legal play, just a hard, tough hit by Mike Pennell.
Totally agree. And Deion Bush, the highlight is his interception against Lamar Jackson when he came in for his 3rd defensive snap of the game when I think Mike Edwards had gotten injured. He comes in and picks off Lamar Jackson in the end zone. Huge play. Don't forget about his 85 special team snaps in the playoffs, though. That matched the team lead. That's a big deal. The Chiefs were really solid on special teams throughout the playoffs. You got to have your 4 core, reliable special teamers in there, and Deion Bush is one. So he's made plays on defense when he's come in for Kansas City. I always remember a few years ago against the Chargers when Nick Bolton had the interception to end the game. Deion Bush deflected that pass that Nick then intercepted. Yep. So Deion Bush has made plays defensively for the Chiefs, but also on special teams. Don't forget about that.
A couple more additions coming from outside in. One is Irv Smith Jr. He's a NFL legacy. His dad played in the National Football League. Irv was a second-round pick out of Alabama by the Minnesota Vikings. Last year he played with the Cincinnati Bengals, had some injury issues, but he's got 10 touchdowns. And his early days, his rookie year and first 2 years with Minnesota, if you go back and watch the video, there's a lot of third-level catches. He's running double routes. He's also got a lot of corner routes in the end zone where the red zone threat becomes a factor. And then with Irv, one thing that'll be key here, remember the Chiefs don't have a fullback. You need an H-back kind of presence. And people say, well, what does that mean for the rest of the tight end room? Hey, the Chiefs this year, I would have said if Jody Fortson would not have been hurt, would have carried 4 tight ends.
Yeah,
there's a chance you carry 4 tight ends and 6 wide receivers instead of 3 and 7, especially when you don't have a so-called full back. So I'm excited to see what Irv Smith Jr. can do.
Yeah, interesting body type, like you mentioned, 6'2", 240 pounds, really athletic, just super athletic player. And you flip the tape on, you see that right away. And yeah, I mean, in 2020, he had a really solid season. Had over 300 yards receiving, had 5 receiving touchdowns, all in the red zone. He was kind of primed for a big year, I think, in 2021 with the Vikings, but he tore his meniscus in the preseason, missed the entire year, came back for the 2022 season with the Vikings, but hurt his ankle halfway through the year. So last season with Cincinnati, I think there was some buzz about him. Like this guy looked really good a couple years ago, dealt with some injuries. He had an okay season, but probably not what he was hoping for. But now, several years removed from those injuries, just 25 years old still, and coming to learn from the greatest tight end of all time and being Coach Reid's offense, yeah, I'm excited to see what he can do. You add an athletic player, a versatile player to the tight end room. You have a full offseason to prepare and to be around this organization, and he's healthy is the most important thing. So OTAs will be fun to watch to see what Irv Smith Jr. can do.
This time of year, you and I are into reading like 10,000 draft analysis. I went back and looked at his coming out of Alabama. What was his biggest asset, they thought? Being a move blocker. And a tight end and a move blocker in this system is absolutely, well, it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. So we're all curious and excited to see what Irv Smith Jr. can do. The other one is Matt Araiza, who was signed as a punter. Now, some off-field issues, you can look at those, but there's lawsuits have been dropped, and the path is now clear for Matt. But he was at San Diego State and thought to be, at the time, maybe the best college punter ever. He was shattering records, NCAA records for the Aztecs, and Buffalo then drafted him. Then they backed off of that because of what was happening off the field. Now that's since been proven where Matt was vindicated in those. Again, you can check it out. But Matt Araiza, left-footed punter now. We're getting back to the days of Dustin Colquitt.
DC.
But this guy's an athlete, an outstanding soccer athlete. He was great in track. He went to Rancho Bernardo High School, which is prevalent and prominent in San Diego. But people have kind of like, what? We have a new punter? So Tommy Townsend, good luck in Houston against the Texans. We'll see you when we play Houston. But Matt Araiza will be another guy interesting to watch in this offseason.
One of the strongest legs I've ever seen. I mean, if you go back and look at his punt in the preseason with the Bills a couple years ago, it's like a 75-yard punt. I mean, it's just silly. Just an incredible leg. As a holder is the question. I don't know if he's done that a ton. I think he maybe did it a little bit at San Diego State. But can he hold? We'll see. He'll have to learn that here in the offseason, and that's one of the main things to watch during OTAs is him as a holder because it's obviously very important. But there's no doubt this guy is incredibly talented, and we'll see what he can do. Tommy Townsend did a lot of great things for this team, though, and that's the bittersweet part of this time of year is it's a lot of fun adding these new players and seeing where players go around the league, refreshing Twitter over and over again. But we get to know these guys, and for any fan watching, this team is so good at showing their personality that you get to know these players. And especially when you win a championship or back-to-back championships, you feel like you truly know them. And for guys to depart, like Willie Gay Jr. going to New Orleans and, Tommy going to the Texans, it's hard to see these guys go. Nick Allegretti going to the Commanders. Like, we love these guys, and they were parts of a team that won a championship. And again, in this case, back-to-back championships. We wish them nothing but the best. They'll be Chiefs for life. And it's tough to see those guys go. But that's the nature of the business, and they'll have hopefully some good fortune elsewhere unless they're playing us.
We'll have to change then the answer to the trivia question because he was the most missed name, I think, of who still is on the roster from the 2019 Super Bowl 54 champions.
Yep.
And Nick Allegretti was on that list.
Yep, he sure was.
And so to take him off of there. That list is getting even. But we wish him the best in Washington with the Commanders. But just think, playing with an injured UCL joint and just gutting it out and filling it in for Joe Thuney when he had to go down, when he went down against, couldn't miss the Baltimore game in Super Bowl 58. So Nick, go get him. We don't have to play you, so we don't have to worry about you. We'll have to worry about Tommy, and we will have to worry about Willie because we play New Orleans as well. But there you have it. We continue to churn and burn around the National Football League. But in this episode, a little bit of looking back, looking forward, trying to figure it out because you got a stone cold lock. Big vote coming up, Jackson County. And then also, hey, we're right in the middle of the New York Stock Exchange.